but I can empathize. I'm not like into looking at myself either. But we must do it for science and humanity. Yes, make this a great sacrifice. Okay, so we're going live. We are live, and speaking of which, this is now welcome everyone. Let's do a clean start. There's 4 people listening, but when we do the podcast feed, we do a little bit of trimming. So not to demystify things too aggressively, but we're starting now. Welcome. Welcome to episode 5 of the DIY Disclosure Podcast. It's a new podcast, but I'm enjoying it very much so far. I'm thrilled to have as our guest the great Roy D Herbert. Roy is known for his work in the philosophy of physics, particularly regarding the interpretation of quantum mechanics and the nature of scientific theories. He has discussed issues related to realism, the role of observation in science, and the implications of quantum theory for our understanding of reality. At least that's what I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Roy has, of course, famously been contributing to the discussion on geometric unity, perhaps more than just contributing in my view, and unification through his dilation theory and dynamic behaviourism. Roy, it's great to do our first face-to-face interaction. How's it going?
It's going fantastic, and good morning, good evening, good whatever, wherever you are.
Good whatever to you, sir. Yes. I'm on the west coast of California currently, and you're somewhere in the United Kingdom, I believe.
Yes, I'm near Exeter in the West Country of the UK, England, at the moment. But going all over the place at the moment. Lots of travelling at the moment. So yeah, it's nice to be home. I'm in my spare room at the moment, everybody. So. Welcome to my spare room.
Yeah, I know. I've been sort of nomadic and we're all dealing with gear. We're going to have to be a little less expansive on this conversation than usual. We have great time talking in spaces about all kinds of things. And I'm so grateful to know you and to be educated by you on an almost daily basis. But yeah, since I'm on the road, I'm battery powered right now. So I'll keep you updated on how long the battery lasts. We might have to do a part 2 if we'll definitely do a part 2 regardless. So anyway, we're going to jump right in. Dynamic behaviourism, dilation theory, right? Perhaps you can tell us, the origin of these ideas.
Okay, the origin of the ideas spring from observations in nature. Okay, so nature was my guide. From a very, very small boy, I noticed things that other people just didn't notice or just took for granted. And I was one of those pain in the asses that was always asking the question, what's going on there? Why is that? Do that? Those sorts of things. And I learned early the laws of conservational symmetries, essentially, that govern all things in nature. And I found that correlation between the geometric unities of all things that are shown through that, the curling of the patterns that we see in all things, for example, the petals of the flower, the shape of a cone, all these patterns, as it were, share a common geometry. And that common geometry is the result of what I term dynamic behaviourism, in that the properties of any moment, as it were, denote the behavioural outcomes for you. And we as observers, as it were, are just another property in that moment, and therefore our consciousness, as it were, and so on, is all interlinked in there, and so on, and those sorts of bits and pieces. So it breaks down time essentially being a quantum moment, an event that we could call a now, and the properties of that moment of now denote what you are, and the behavior and the topological behavior that is appropriately applied to you, i.e. those conservational rules. And also with those rules come certain topological properties. For example, certain topological dynamics hold very, very fast rates of time. Some of them hold very, very much slower rates of time. So they are not scalar. They are scale invariant, as it were, and they comply to all things at all scales. So that provides a way of providing geometric unity via this mechanism I call dynamic behaviourism. Okay.
Just to pause there for a second, in terms of geometric unity and your dynamic behaviourism and dilation theory, did one originate before the other? Were they all happening sort of in unison, but you only became aware of each other over time? Like, how does that timeline work in terms of these ideas?
It was seeing a bigger picture a more holistic picture of things in a moment, as it were, of perception, and refinding that perceptual thought consideration through that process, breaking it down and reverse engineering it, as it were, led to the hypothesis that is dilation theory and then dynamic behaviorism. So one did lead to the other, but they are intertwined, as it were. But as you understand it more yourself as you're going into it, it becomes more apparent, should we say, in that they are all interconnected. And that's the thing. It's like how do I, when I'm talking about the chapters in ordering my chapters of my book, it's like, where do I start in that all things are interrelated? And there's a lot of repetition, therefore, that you can fall into. So it's best to trying to avoid that is a nightmare, especially when you're trying to explain a unified theory. So I do it from a holistic approach, basically looking at the bigger picture and then breaking that down in using very much analogies that people are much more in touch with in their everyday lives, i.e. that they are in touch with within nature. So that's how I express things and those sorts of ways. But dilation theory, the beginnings of it occurred when I was a very, very little boy, when I was at a comprehensive senior school here in the UK, Longford Comprehensive, there you go, in Bedfont, Middlesex, West London. And I was an unruly, completely rebellious maverick in all regards, thinking and arguing with everything that was ever given to me. So they finally bent and had a discussion in the staff room about me, and then they sent me to a nice lady who gave me a load of puzzles and things to solve, as it were. And then they discovered that I had a very high IQ. And then they sent me off to a college for gifted children, and the theory of dilation theory started there. So when I was learning more about very serious levels of physics, but I was only about 11 years old at the time. And I had ideas about time, and my understanding and intuitive nature about time seemed to have always been with me, as it were. And then I witnessed something when I was 13 at a family barbecue that defied all logic, yet the phenomena. And trying to put that together in my head really solidified dilation theory. And that's when it really started to kick off. And, but I started to pursue it in a much more serious manner, as it were. There you go.
Do you guesstimate or sense that phenomenon experiences like this kind are perhaps, at least in part, for the purpose of inspiring people like you in this way?
Potentially, by, as it were, by showing the wizard, as it were, I'm now looking for the veil. Or you could look at it the other way around. But yes, it said to me that this thing is defying all the laws of physics that I know them, unless two things are true. That therefore, there being it holding a faster relative rate of time and a zero inertia state, or the occupants would be spaghettified and mush, and it would be it would be impossible to achieve. So those two factors, as it were, played on my mind greatly. Then I went into partially like a part naval academy sort of thing. I bummed out of that. That was science and physics, and because the IT revolution was occurring at the same time at this time, and I was an IT whiz, so I went that direction. And I didn't really go the academic or the physics route, so I went purely the IT route. Ended up doing real-time control systems for the UK government, and de facto standardizations of the defined standard, all that sort of stuff for real-time rail industry, side of things for control and traffic management systems and all that sort of stuff. So it's all disparate time systems, and and each server has its own weight, as it were, of its load. So each one's going to have a different synchronicity of time is running at different rates for different equipments and servers and things across a distributed network of millions and millions of componentry bits and pieces. You can imagine complexity of this thing. So I came up with a methodology, a principle of applying a simple methodology called ORM, Object Relational Mapping, which can integrate with another technology called OLE for process control, which is OPC, we call OPC. And doing that integration, as it were, just blew my mind in behavioral information technology and methodologies and doing all that sort of thing. So did all that. And while I was doing a white paper, I wrote these 3 words: properties denote the behavior. And something just clicked. And at that moment, I'd realized dynamic behaviorism. And I then went deeper and deeper into that. And that was in 2015. So the first postulations of dilation theory were actually published in 1997. But they were potentially considered too ontological. There you go.
Where were they published?
Every single academic center on Earth of any worth. And I sent it to everybody and every news organization and every government body in the UK. So they cannot deny that it was sent. I have the receipts.
So, okay, I want to rewind a little bit because one of the things I'm trying to wrap my head around is, you have some friends and colleagues that are all kind of looking at these unified theories from, different vantage points and different angles. So in contrast to geometric unity, I believe you said that yours is more of like a big picture outwards, big picture then inwards kind of analysis, as opposed to geometric unity, which is maybe different.
Well, no, we can do it both ways. Essentially, we can do it both ways. That's the beauty of it. You can do it both ways. Okay, so if we look at the bigger picture, as it were, in that all things are conserved, okay, within the cosmos, in all ways. Okay, we know this to be apparent, okay, already. Those laws of conservation of geometric symmetries govern all things, okay? So if we extrapolate that, as it were, that rule, okay, of conservation that governs all things to time itself, i.e. the moments of time, then time itself is governed by those symmetries, is because of its continuous nature, is given a continuous symmetry, a fluid symmetry, okay? So now we can consider time not just as the moments of the 4th dimension, but as a greater temporal hydrodynamic environment in the 5th dimension, the ether. Okay, so the ether actually has a real scientific basis now from the conservation of emergent entropic time, what I've penned emergent entropic time.
Hold on, the ether, is the ether 5D, or is ether a threshold between 3D and 5D, or both?
It's a bit of both. We're going to have to go into the physics now of Gavin Wintz in his
he was episode 4, yeah, and I know him because of you. So yeah, he's a great guy too.
So yes, in 3D time. So there's a lot more beef to time, as it were, than just the moment. Okay, so that perceptual impasse, as it were, that paradigm has been breached. But understanding that is another matter. So there is that. Even for me, it's extraordinarily difficult. One has to get into a certain frame of mindset that is just beyond oneself, outside of time, as it were, looking upon time, but not as those moments, but a more whole, holistic, like I say, a more unified, holistic thing, in that reality is essentially a 5D fluid time, and that we just experience slices of that.
And sorry, I just want to dig in here. Every time I speak to you, there's more, like a lotus flower of ideas, like
neurons
everything to understand. Yeah, I mean, I mostly interpret it as an artist and a poet, but it's still fun to try to wrap my head around it. But okay, so because you said you'd have to look outside of time, is that a metaphor, or is there anything outside of time?
Yes, there is. Time is an emergent phenomena. We can consider time being an entropic emergent phenomena born of quantum information change. Okay, so the resistance to that underlying change in the information denotes the length of one's moment of time. Okay, so denotes the length of dilation. And because of that fluid symmetry in the 5th dimension, we can now see that there's essentially flow differentials in that medium. Now, wherever we have any differential in any flow within nature, an inertia is born. Yes, we've now provided the resolution for gravity by considering time in that way. So now we can actually regress, as it were, using those temporal side of things, that lower contextual temporal domain, as it were, to actually unify relativity. In that there's two theories for relativity, one for things that have mass and one for things that are in motion, in that time tells matter how to move via that differential inertia, okay, of time, the flow of time. And motion or matter, as it were, influences that time. So now we've got the full circle, as it were. And because we've got that conservational geometric symmetry being invariant, i.e., it applies to any scale. It's the properties that denote the behavioral and topological outcomes for you, not your scale. Okay, so now we've provided geometric unity of all the scales. And some recent results are just coming about those hydrodynamics now actually explaining some of the unpredictability of that quantum realm, in that essentially all are a function of time, no matter what scale one is. And there you go. Everything is a function of time. But that time is, like I say, and you say, is emergent from somewhere. We could say that that's emergent from that informational change domain. So there is a 0 point domain of information, the domain where the arrow of time and entropy are actually defined, that realm of entanglement, as it were, where there is no distance between things now anymore. So it explains that. And it also explains certain other paradoxes, in that black holes, for example, now that we know those true attributes of time, in that those black holes are essentially a time tensor cascade now, a temporal superposition, essentially, where time is stopped. And where time does not exist in the cosmos, there is nothing. So no more event horizon fantasies or singularities, or where mass break down, because there is no paradox, because there is no time. So the information is never lost. The information, as it were, is just stored. There you go.
Just get stuck there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And would that likely apply to the Big Bang Theory, being presumably the output of the wormhole experience,
Well, what we've done is we've changed the very foundations of Einstein's field equations and the Newtonian equations as well, in that we found that regressed, as it were, unifying factor being a temporal one. Time is fundamental, therefore, as is that information. Okay, so that's the basis of it all. And if we add those temporal dynamics, as it were, to Einstein's field equations, and add that fifth dimension to Einstein's field equations, then everything starts to tick the boxes of all the bits and pieces that were actually missing, as it were.
So as your dynamic behaviorism and dilation theory is proven to be absolutely true, would that suggest that the Big Bang did not happen, or was it maybe like some sort of
temporal explosion?
Temporal explosion, starting from no time to much of it?
Starting from pretty much no time, or that essence of we cannot even describe it. Right? We don't even hold the language to describe that event. This is the problem. Okay. The closest analogy that I can actually find to it would be that imagine a piece of nothing that when you press your return key becomes something.
So yeah, that makes it seem like a simulation then. but that's just our simple type of
analogy of trying to rationalize something. But you see what I mean? But as I say, therefore, okay, and those moments of now, as it were, and all the rest of it, and the way that's all hanging together now, is that our cosmos, okay, here it is, an emergent contextual continuum of geometric symmetries within symmetries projected upon a gauge lattice. So yes, a holographic space-time continuum. But any construct will require a constructor, be it natural or otherwise. Okay, so that's still maybe a natural thing. I'm not, see what I mean? I'm not going to be putting my flag down in anybody's corner. Okay, at the we have far too much to learn yet still as we go down that rabbit hole. But what I'm looking for now is that because of that conservational nature of the cosmos is my blueprint of going lower. Okay, that's the way it must go because of the design of what I've got on. See what I mean? Above must be what's below.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's all that.
Let me rewind a bit more. Also, you were mentioning about entanglement and the 0 point and entanglement. Paradoxically bringing things of near infinite distance into 1 0 point. And were you saying this is an example of zero time, or how does time factor into the entanglement process again?
Well, there's still everything is a function of time, no matter what contextuality. I mean contextuality in the regards of we shouldn't consider outside of the 5 or the 6 potential dimensions, or 7 even, or 8 that there may actually be. Okay, we should think of things differently, not dimensionality anymore, but contextuality, in that we are contextually abstract in those moments of now. And there is another side to our duality, that virtual side to our duality, as it were, that again, which supports waves. Now, what medium is that supports waves? It's a fluid. It's a hydrodynamic environment. It is that hydrodynamic environment of the 5th dimension. It is a phase of existence, essentially, like all things are a conservational geometric symmetry, a phase, essentially, of state. Okay, so it's like that. It's like your fluid in your coffee. Okay, at normal room temperature, it's a fluid. Change the properties, it dynamically becomes a solid. Okay, when it goes so low. When it gets higher, it dynamically changes its state again to that of a gas. You keep going, it changes to a plasma. If we go very, 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 very cold, it turns to the phase of quanta. Now, that phase of quanta has very, very different topological properties. Okay, one of those properties is an incredible relative rate of time. Quanta is almost like supercharged temporally. Now, LIGO results showed us that even things such as large as neutron stars can hold those topological flavors of those transitional phase dynamics. Essentially, we associate with the very smallest of things. Why? Because they hold the properties of the smallest of things. Properties denote the behavioral outcomes independently of scale. That result of those neutron stars proved dynamic behaviorism beyond any doubt, essentially. And that now provides essentially macrocosm pretending to be microcosm represented as macrocosm, and those gaining of those temporal properties. Now, as I've expressed, those temporal differential inertias are essentially the key to the inertia of gravity. So the slower your relative rate of time, the greater the inertia, and the faster one's relative rate of time, the lower the inertia. This is inversely proportional to the rate of time flow, again signifying and suggesting a 5-dimensional hydrodynamic model of time. So it's beyond logic and beyond all reason that this is, I'm sorry, but as I've said it now, it must be apparent to anybody with any grasp of physics. Pretty much elementary level. I consider this elementary. I really do. This isn't hard physics. It's common sense, really, a lot of it. I'll take you to a stream and show you that placing a stick at the middle, the fastest flow, will go to the sea, no inertia. Bring that stick closer to the bank, and as you do, the inertia will be more and more and more inversely proportional to its flow. Exactly the same way that gravity works. So there's fluid dynamics at work, and we now provided that hydrodynamic environment in the 5th on those conservational moments of time. And as I said, none of this is rocket science, and it provides the ability to negate the inertia of gravity by holding a faster relative rate of time. Consider the attributes of something that held a faster relative rate of time, now not holding any inertia. What would its property attributes be? It would be zipping through our skies like a UAP. So the evidence of its apparent thing, as it were, I realized when I was 13 years old. I've just been trying to formulate the language to explain it to the rest of humanity since then.
well, the rest of humanity, myself included. Thanks you again. So you discuss passive, temporal, inertial, differential inertia, right?
Yes.
Can you,
Emergent.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
an
you've
emergent.
explained this before, but help me understand it better. What about it is passive?
But basically, it's the same form of any differential inertia, that it's passive. Okay, they are a passive pseudo-like force, essentially, but they are not a force. They are an inertia. That's it. So when people say that gravity is a force, they're wrong. Okay, and when they say that we can't unify because we don't understand the universe, they are projecting their own limited perception. Get to the back of the queue, bro.
Now for a bit of a personal interest moment here. You describe yourself publicly as an apprentice Time Lord. Who do you consider to be your master?
Oh God,
If anyone, you don't have to have one.
that's a tough one.
Perhaps you are the master. You're just being too modest about it.
No one else unified the cosmos simply and elegantly. It's been, I don't know how long we've been around, and I fixed Newton's stuff, and I fixed Einstein's stuff, and I fixed quantum, and I fixed everybody else's stuff, and on the ray, as it were. But like, I've been shouting at doors for 30 years nearly now, Mello. So I'm not going to be praising any of them at all. But I would say the one that's possibly engaged most is, from a physicist point perspective, is Tom Anderson, and Jens Einhard, Thomas Van Riet. These are some of the leading physicists of our time, people, and you probably might not have heard of them, but they really are. They're pushing the boundaries. They're not the media physicists, okay? These are the real deal. And Tom Anderson is a joint winner of the, I think, a gold medal for quantum field theory. And he follows me.
Yes.
And on the mathematical side of things, I would say Martin Gibson. I'm definitely Martin is my peer, and I'm by no means his. He greatly exceeds my intellect in a lot of regards. I deem things in those holistic terms, as it were, but Martin has gone into the details of the quantum, as it were, and baryonic mass and all sorts of things, in redefining the very basis of and even redefining what we think of as the limited scale of the Planck scale. So we're going much further now with Martin's work. So I would say Martin, and then obviously Eric on that side of things. In that Eric provided me with the courage, as it were, to go for it. Because I think he knew that I was right. So I shared my work with Eric a few years ago. This might be a news update to a lot of people, and he immediately followed me and started asking millions of questions and going, this sort of thing. And I pointed out and I shouted at him, "Thank God you bloody followed me. I've been trying to get hold of you for 2 years. I watched you in an interview and it just jumped out at me, and you hit it nail on the bloody head, and you don't even realize, it's like you've got it right there." So went through it all with him, and the geometric unity using that conservational geometric symmetry and those sorts of things. And we just took it from there. And he's now gone away, actually, and is now re-fired up doing geometric unity and should be publishing very soon. Fingers crossed. But if anybody nominates me for anything, I will be sharing it. Okay, it won't be just for me, because without Martin's being my calculator, my backbone, as it were, okay, in the mathematics, I would be nothing. Okay, so there's that. So whatever prize I get, I share with Martin first off. Anything that comes outside of that, in regards of any developments or anything that we take forward now with it, that's coming forward, especially with Gavin's stuff and Existics, and a very exciting time with that, and stuff that's going to be happening in the spring with some research and some lab time, which is fantastic news for everybody involved. and anything comes out of that, then the prizes will be shared in more and more. You see what I mean? It's there's lots more people now getting involved, because as you find out, and you're postulating this stuff, you're meeting people, and that it was he's coming from different disciplines, from Martin's discipline and so on. Everybody's coming from different angles, but they're all finding me at that place, as it were, where all things are a function of time, and that time is extended beyond the fourth, as it were, and it's more rounded. It doesn't just end, as I say, at the 5D, because that 5D is now a three-dimensional type time. This ocean has depth. You see what I mean? It's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
There's
So
plenty to it already. Yeah.
yes.
Um,
So I'm just lifting the veil, as it were, but there's a lot more to discover. A lot more. But the potentiality means that if we can imagine speed, time, and distance in that metric. Okay. Now, where speed has an accelerator and your distance, as it were, has a marker, our temporal time variable now has its own accelerator also. So now we can diminish our journeys in more ways than just the spatial dimensions. We can diminish our journeys, as it were, using temporal dimensions. Aha. Within faster relative rates of time. So our journeys, as it were, are cut vastly short using those temporal tricks. Because we're not now losing those spatial dimensions for motion. We're not getting that causality effect, as it were, of the dilation of time due to the motion. So we're not getting that light speed hang up either.
Yeah. Well, I was very excited to learn about, how Gavin's doing lab work to test his ideas. And what are some things or additional things that can be done to test your concepts of dilation theory, time dilation, and, dynamic behaviorism?
Well, one of the tests that they need to do is to essentially, which is implemented at the moment, as I'll point out in a moment, but one of the ones is to accurately measure relative rates of time for those different topological phase dynamics. Essentially, that's crucial. Okay, so we know where those topological come into those scales of time, as it were, of how fast it is or how slow it is in time. Okay, so that's first off. Then we can measure that, and then we can gain. Okay, if we put something on that and then measure its weight, for example, and the weight diminishes, we now know that what that scale is in relationship to the inertia, and it's negation. You see what I mean? We now have a scale involved, essentially. Okay, and it will be, as we know, it will be inverse. You see what I mean? It's that
so.
Sort of thing.
Where are you at in terms of actually performing this kind of research in the field? What would be required to get it done?
Oh, well, it's partially been done already, but they're sort of like in denial of the results still, even though they did publish the results, which actually made me decide to go public, to drop my alias that I was using for about 12 years.
Oh, was your alias Time Lord by chance?
Yes.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was sort of like that sort of thing. Yeah, because as you know, this is a very, very, very difficult subject to be, taboo subject, especially with those behaviors, for example. There's been no research into topological dynamics for 40 years. None. Yet in the last 4, there's been lots.
So, as a visual artist, I'm often trying to make, and I often do make pictures based on the beautiful things you tell me about. So this topological idea, right? When I actually made some art inspired by you talking about this in terms of the topology of the human temple or something, the body temple, and that was pretty cool though. But I'm trying to imagine what does topography mean in space? Topography as I commonly see it as in the terrain of maps and things like that in a globe 3D environment. But then how do you deal with that in 5D?
Well, we're not at the moment. That's the thing. We're not even venturing anywhere near in describing what these things may actually manifest in the fifth dimensional realm. What would be there actually, in that they are a shadow of themselves in us. So, like I say, we are exploring them right now, but we're only doing it from the perspective, as it were, from that granular slice of the moment, and not perceiving things in that more broader terminology. For example, if we look at the fluctuated nature of quantum realm and it defying all logic, as it were. Well, it doesn't defy all logic when one uses temporal hydrodynamics. And you see what I mean? So, and like I was talking previously when we were talking about the crop circles, the geometries that work there. If you take those as a slice, as it were, and then project that in the three-dimensional, now the four-dimensional, now the five-dimensional, what does one then get? You see what we've got lots more to explore, and I don't know. See what I mean? I'm like everybody else. We're locked in the box, as it were. So it's, you know.
Well, this is DIY disclosure where we, it's self-revelation through free-form conversation.
Well, you can do the mind trip. You can do the mind trip, as it were, but maintaining it, like I say, is almost impossible, because any interaction with the reality, as it were, brings you back smack home. So it's sort of like a mental mind palace, as it were, of temporal mechanics and hydrodynamics. And I mean, to be honest with you, hydrodynamics and fluid dynamics and things like this in physics are not taken up in physics. If you were to look at the current sign up for students doing that particular thesis, for example, in fluid dynamics, or looking at going into that for their particular thesis, you'll find that they are a margin of 0.1% or something like this. It's the toughest subject in physics, and as is temporal mechanics, and as is topological dynamics. So the three of the worst, as it were. No one, it's very rare that you find anybody. And as I say, gentlemen, I come from the standpoint of a unified framework. I hope you can speak of the same, one that does not contain paradoxes or singularities, because if you are, then I'm going to throw sticks at your stones. So, there's all that going on at the moment. But yeah, it's all good fun. It's all good fun that they're actually engaging now. Like I say, it's been nearly 30 years of shouting at closed doors. But they said, no, we're not going to publish this. I even tried to go through my local MP to approach Minister of State for Science and, to formally do it. So it's even like booked in with Parliament's email systems and everything. I was banging on the, Prime Minister's doors with, hey, guess what? Star Trek.
Yeah, but well, scientism is a thing.
Shut up, Roy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's an exciting time where we can talk somewhat freely online about these things. Have all these. Oh, you're okay there. All these research projects. It'd be my pleasure to, as I mentioned, bring you into some of them where all these concepts are being developed from different angles. Whether technological, in terms of consciousness, in terms of being a time lord.
I'll be honest with you, I'm completely and utterly puzzled and shocked that no one has actually approached me from them at all. I mean, I, provided a whole thing of this is how you do it, and this is what's going on, and this is where
I'm approaching you. I'm welcoming you into the secret laboratories of DIY disclosure, where only the finest maverick minds like yours are doing crazy things. But it's been fun getting Science Bob and people like you, and the one secret now public but still alias scientists on the project involving teleportation and all kinds of things. All of this relates, and I think there's a flying saucer craft in the works. Let's just say not gonna harm anyone with it, obviously, just for scientific testing purposes.
I wouldn't be shouting about it.
We need a good navigation system for it, and I think understanding.
Well, you're going to have to navigate.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of like, you remember in the past when we once went on a discovery in ships that sail. We'll be doing much the same thing, but sailing on an ocean of time, essentially. So we're, that film, the time law. What is it? Time travelers or something?
Time
Like that. What
Bandits.
was it? Time Bandits. That's
Yeah,
the
I was
one.
just watching that the other day. I was trying to make art because I was trying to do a thing of like, we are the Time Bandits, but then it was hard to depict it, in a way that didn't look silly. But I love that
That's a
movie.
really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and have you seen this thing? I've only just someone mentioned it to me a couple of weeks ago, and I looked at one thing. Jumpers. Have you ever watched a program called Jumpers?
There's a movie
It
called
was like a
Jumper.
series. It was on the
Series.
Netflix series of these bunch of people that can jump their consciousness to other people who are just about to die or have died. That sort of thing.
I think I know some people that do that. At least that's what they explained to me. So yeah,
I
all these
found it
ego death
absolute-
things, are really
Yes.
useful for
Yeah.
this
I found
technology.
it really. I found the concept a bit far fetched, but the physics that they built around the whole thing were pretty much on the ball. And I'm thinking, these sods have been reading my tweets, man.
Yeah, this is the base reality that's coming out. They can't hide it much longer. It appears we have this controlled disclosure thing for reasons to be determined. But yeah, it's cool. All these different nodes reaching the same potential conclusion, but through none as all encompassing as your theories, obviously, but certainly all confirming your theories. And I'd like to see more and more how this can be turned into technology and research experiments and projects that can, give us massive quantities of data, so that no longer can these
Well,
ideas
understanding how to create those topological phases and dynamics, essentially, and shortcuts to be able to achieve that will be beneficial. In that, if you can at room temperature, then you've got room temperature superconductivity. So there's that. And with those different topological states, as it were, come different temporal properties, rates of time, and we can use those. Imagine, for example, Milo, where we increase the relative rate of time to the ATO rate, for example, 10 to 13,000 fold the relative rate of time, as it were, a ridiculous amount. Imagine placing something inside that was harnessing some form of energy, and then you could take that out of there in 2 minutes, and yet it's been in there for equivalent in relative time for 104 years. You see what I mean? This is what I'm talking about playing with tricks with time, as it were, in contained areas, or even now that we know that the inertia of gravity is linked to the relative rate of time, i.e. the slowing of the relative rate of time, therefore that any entropy or directed entropy will slow time. Okay, so we can now use that directed entropy to create an inertia to drag us through space-time. Star Trek. Okay, because we're not in motion as it using the spatial dimensions. We're basically shortening the length of the cosmos in front of us through that inertia. So you see what I mean? So motion without motion, movement, as it were, and lots of tricks like that. And those temporal gains in rates of time, for example, topological environment of extended electron states, such as a neutron star, has an extended electron field, okay, due to the dynamics, the actual makeup of the thing. The electrons can't sit in its core mass that's at the center. So all the electrons are pushed out, as it were, or extended in state. That then denotes electrons orbiting a nuclei. Bang. Conservational geometric symmetry kicks in and says, the universe says, you're an atom. I'm going to give you the topological behavior of an atom, and with it, the temporal properties. Hence, the spin rate speed of a neutron star correlates to that. See what I mean? It's all, everything's pointed. And where we saw those mergers of those two neutron stars, we saw those discombobulated transitional phase dynamics being into it, thinking, oh my God, this thing's an atom, and then no, it's of the larger scale, wham, and back to it being considered quantum again. The dynamics were really getting turbulent, and then it was whoop, that temporal superposition was achieved. Black hole. You see, so it's all matching up. So what is a black hole? Is a black hole now even considered at the larger scales? Potentially not. See what I mean? A black hole could, in a nutshell, be an electron now, or even smaller. But it can't be defined, as it were, in time, because of that underlying information, as it were, the length of time being denoted by the resistance to its change is far too entropic to reach a conclusion within its frame of reference moment of any observer. Yes, it's gone into a temporal superposition. Essentially, within ours, it's locked out, as it were. There's a region of space-time that cannot render. There you go. We've answered the quandary, the problem, the paradoxes, and everything else to go with it. A black hole is essentially not a hole. It's just stored time. That's it. And that everything essentially in our cosmos, all emergent phenomena, as it were, be it physical or metaphysical, is now simply a function of time.
So a black hole, comes to a screeching halt in terms of time. Is there any possibility within this framework that something could be ejected out of the other side of a black hole, or is it certainly just
No.
a wall of
No time.
nothing? Yeah, no time. Yeah.
No time. Until there is time again, until that moment of realization has come to that conclusion of that resistance, as it were, of the change, and it said, okay, I have an outcome. I have a, fully resolved, conserved outcome. Bang. What's it now for a moment? It's now a monster of a neutron star. It's not a black hole anymore. There you go. There is nothing really that is a black hole. It's a super monster of a neutron star in a temporal superposition phased state. So it is outside of time. It is at the realm of the informational contextual domain, as it were, stalled. Okay, waiting for that moment of realization, and then wham, and then it is. And God help you if you're nearby when it is.
Would this mean that spaghettification in relation to these ideas of
wrong.
black holes being like, is that a non-concept of meaning? Yeah, just wrong. Because I
Completely
saw
wrong.
something spaghettify in terms of the phenomenon. It just looked that way because it just like streaked out into a
No.
line, but it wasn't a black hole that I'm aware of.
You're not lost. You're not lost, as it were. You're just frozen in time. Okay, you're not spaghettified. The gravity is going to make you thin, but the gravity is going to make the space-time that represents you thin around you. You will not know any difference. You will know no difference whatsoever. The observer outside will see you looking like a limp bruschetti, being, getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. But you won't know any difference at all. You will still be alive. You will still be in your suit, and you'll still be kicking, going, "Hey guys, surprise, great man!" That sort of thing. So until time for you stops, essentially, and you will be frozen at that moment until it realizes what it is. That'll be the end of you.
So, if I were to look back in terms of time and our theories of it and the science and math and technology regarding to it, like many things, it has been amplified by, war logistics of trying to, kill people before they kill you and having to travel from point A to point B, and they keep everyone on the same page in the process. And then also mass transportation and shipping, led to many perceived innovations in terms of how to keep everyone coordinated around the globe. So with your Time Lord concepts, which will bring it all together, what are some applications for how this could help the world, and how can assist you perhaps in rolling this out into the economy in the form of products and things that pertain to our current civilization? How are we going to get you out there as the Time Lord?
Well, Ashton's on the right track, but he's missing the trick. Okay, in a lot of regards to the 0 point energy, in that, yes, you can put a bucket in the ether, as it were, take a swipe, and the ocean will refill behind you. There's that. But it's like designing the bucket that can do the abstraction, as it were, of that representation of the ether. But until you actually start diving down the topological flavors, get down that route, as it were, and then get into the scale of physics, where you can potentially use that's invariance of scale, as it were, to scale yourself up. Okay, so we can take quanta, for example, and scale them up now to be the size of a bus. And as we scale them up, the energies scale. So we don't really need the 0 point energy. We just need to learn the scale of physics tricks of micro to macro. And those sorts of things. Also, the temporal manipulation of zones leads to potentially put a solar panel next to it, inside it. Put a battery in the environment, charge up your batteries in 5 seconds. How long were they in there? 3 months. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's things
All
like
these time
this.
tricks. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So it's temporal tricks, temporal teleportation, for example, plus light speed. Yeah, plus light speed is a possibility now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was invited recently
What
by
was
a friend in the community to join him in one of his teleportation adventures. He's working on it both technologically in some ways I'm not allowed to describe publicly yet, but also in terms of the consciousness experience side. So it'd be cool to get you guys whiteboarding together, especially before I sacrifice my temporal, my body form. Because things can go wrong. Apparently, he said if you're not on the same page, you could die in all kinds of interesting ways. But for the good of science, I think we should try it anyway.
I won't be sharing any spaces with flies.
Yeah, if I could date Gina Davis in her prime, I might risk it, in that capacity too. But so yeah, teleportation, is that something? Okay, we're kind of getting into very, very even more than usual theoretical
Don't get
things,
it confused.
yeah.
Don't get it confused with physical teleportation. Okay, it's not a physical teleportation of physically teleporting you from one place to another.
No, that's what I'm working on.
Essentially, that would require essentially a manipulation of the underlying information to be able to say change your location from being rendered here to there. So it's that sort of thing.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
If
it's
you
more
could
about
get
time
to that
manipulation as opposed to
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, physical manipulation. So this is a temporal manipulation. So imagine you're doing the journey, okay, and you're traveling at 3 miles per hour, okay, at your normal tick rate of time. But now we increase your relative rate of time 100-fold. That 3 miles an hour is now times 100. You see what I mean? You're now doing 300 miles an hour, but you're only still traveling at 3 miles an hour.
Do you think this can be done through consciousness alone and non-oriented interactions like my friend says he does?
I think the consciousness link comes into what is, like I was saying, the two sides of our contextuality, in that we are essentially now, we can consider ourselves transformed, abstract transforms in the symmetry of time, in that abstract moment of now. And that essentially our representation, that dynamic behaviourism, is key in that our properties denote those topological behavioural outcomes and what we are. Okay, so everything's decided and determined in that moment. One can override that moment essentially because it is dynamic. Change the properties to say, don't consider me like this, consider me like this topological flavor, and give me those temporal rates of time. Yes, that's potentially what our friends are doing. And that will give us the ability to do all those tricks, as it were, exactly the same as they do. So once that you understand these things, all things, as it were, can be mitigated. So even that technology, as it were, it can be mitigated quite easily when you fully understand it.
Yeah, I find myself talking about intentionality and contextuality, and I think I lifted that from you. Did you lift it from someone else previously? Because it's very central to my, or it's very consistent with my philosophy and methodology of
no, such as contextualities, as it were. I take it from my background in information technologies in that context. Yeah. So I'm sort of mixing the language of the context of the virtual and abstract realms of software methodologies and applying them and those similar analogies, as it were, to describe what is a contextualized continuum of geometric symmetries.
Yeah, no, I love that because I do the same thing with my philosophy in various projects, like the super objective, which is central to the algorithmic jujitsu epistemology and related manuscripts. Comes from my acting training before I got disabled, and from the great Russian philosophers of the acting method is where I kind of got that from. So, and all these things are narrative by nature. So, coming from a filmmaking, screenwriting, theater, philosophy background. It's cool how all these things relate, to these new physics, as well as the storytelling, because the nature of reality is intentional and contextual, which makes a lot of sense. And here's my question about that.
Sure.
The nature of reality in all the Time Lord shenanigans is intentional and contextual, right? So intentional, we get that. Okay. Contextual, does it have to be honestly contextual? Because in terms of our perceptions and intentions, we can fool ourselves into making up new contextuality that isn't true? Does it have to be authentic contextuality, or can you lie about it if you believe it enough? Will it still work? Not that I like
No,
lying. I'm just curious.
no, it has to be based upon some physical reality within the rules of conservation or geometric symmetries. That's the key. Essentially,
Because I
as long
thought
as
that
it
could be a
functions
shortcut
in-
for teleportation if I could, kind of lie myself into, teleportation and time travel without having to go through the necessary narrative, what I would call the coherence narrative of the steps to get you there.
No,
But
you don't need to worry
yeah.
about that. As long as you have the equipment, as it were, it doesn't matter what you think or what you think perspective you take on it. It's not going to worry about that. All
Yeah.
it's worried about is the outcome will be more conserved by doing so.
That resonates with what my process and methodology. So I appreciate that, because authenticity, it's a philosophy about finding and sharing truth in a post-truth world, and whereas truth is defined to be the overlapping cross section of beauty and authenticity and some other things.
Well, it has an elegance. It should have an elegance.
Yeah.
Truth should have an elegance in its simplicity. Anything that's too complicated, if it takes someone 3 minutes to explain it to you, and you're having difficulty understanding it, it means that they don't.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Okay.
I was testing you, hoping that you would say what you would say, but open to whatever the answer might be, because getting into more of the spiritual, metaphysical, philosophical side, one thing I've been kind of playing around with, and I hope one of my future guests will help me understand this better. The idea of like Buddhist detachment and transcendence through that kind of going with the natural flow, which your fluidity of time suggests and your kind of ethics suggest, right? Versus this more manifestation side of things, where you just you want something and you just make it happen. So I don't believe in that 100%. I do feel like we can very strongly determine the intentionality and contextuality, and then the results of what happens from there. But if you do it through these sort of clingy, materialistic, wish fulfillment fantasies, it's not going to be as powerful as if you do it in a more Buddhist kind of natural, go with the flow, the fluid, temporal magic like you're describing. So I always vibe with what you say. I think you're onto something.
It's minimize all the negative outcomes, and you're most likely to have a positive outcome as long as that outcome is more conserved. And essentially, it's like that least resistance rule.
Yeah, and cognitive dissonance through time is going to be the opposite of least resistance. Yeah.
Yeah, so me at the moment, I am the resistance. Get me out of the box, man! Get me out of
it! Yeah, I question everything too, as you can tell. But that's the fun of it. I think that I have a whole philosophy based on the super objective is about finding and sharing, like we're doing now, as much truth as possible until the point of death, and asterisks there beyond should the opportunity present itself. So it's an eternal process of finding out answers and sharing the potential truth as a result. So yeah, and I think with the way the internet works now, and hope it will continue to expand in this sort of free speech, open-minded, collaborative direction, I think that we'll do things beyond what standard academia has been able to achieve. When it's truly a free society where all ideas can be considered and then tested and vetted by the masses, we're not just going to find more truth, but in terms of science, we're going to find more truth in terms of humanity.
Yeah, I think so as well. In that, basically, the ultimate truth is, like I said, that any construct, be it natural or otherwise, ultimately requires a constructor. So, and that then says, what are we? What is, because we can now describe the cosmos, like I say, as a holographic space-time continuum. So that makes us essentially Avatar, and all things Avatar, essentially. So
all things.
All things. So potentially, everything is essentially the same, just a function of time, and it's the properties that denote what you are, and that's held within that information. So it's, everything essentially is that like abstract fractal symmetry within symmetries, within symmetries, within symmetries, within endlessly, as it were. So yes, at the very heart of it all, we are all one, and one is all. Like that three pillars thing or whatever, three temples or whatever it's called. As above, so below. That's the invariance of conservational symmetry, is the as above, so below. That is it. That is the golden ratio, is it? Well, the key nugget that resolves everything. And it's the thing I find most frustrating is like I said, I find this elementary. It's apparent to me that time is a fluid symmetry. I can't see any other way of explanation for the phenomena that is gravity itself, unless
Yeah.
time was a fluid symmetry.
Let's see if anyone else has an all-encompassing unifying theory. I mean, if they could come up with one like you did, perhaps we can compare. But it's the only one available.
We've got quantum field theory that talks about the quantum world, and we've got string theory that talks about the in-between world of the domain of the information potentially and the quanta. So that's the transport, as it were. So string theory is in there because you're going to require that communication, as it were, to the fields and the manipulation of the fields by some medium. So yeah, string theory is in there, and everybody else is in there, as it were. But this provides the holistic thing that just provides the whole thing as a unity, sets boundaries for them, as it were, outside in their domains to find me. And that's why so many are now finding me. So, it's looking good. And like I say, every single week, more sigma, more sigma, more sigma, more sigma, more sigma. And we've not had a negative result in the last 2 years. And I don't know any other theory that has hit that bracket in history.
Okay, game on. Let's keep testing it. Okay, so just as an update, my battery is at 21%. So that gives us some amount of time, but we can pace ourselves accordingly. And okay, one thing I want to follow up on.
To my coffee.
Your coffee? Oh, no, cheers. Coffee break. Yeah, we got 20% battery. I think we can handle ourselves. We have plenty of time to drink coffee. Coffee never gets old. Okay, so okay,
cold coffee.
Yeah, mine's cold now too, but it still does the trick. So the fractal nature of everything, right? Maybe literally everything, maybe not literally everything. Maybe everything if you perceive it through the right point of view or prism.
Yes.
For example, I've been going pretty hard on algorithms. It's in the title of my philosophy, and I'm trying to make a new social media, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not just talking about the algorithm or the algorithmic timeline. Obviously, I'm more ambitious than that, like you are by nature. I'm looking for the whole construct. The algorithms that dictate the entire universe. Maybe it's one. Maybe there's algorithms within algorithms, right? And, I get a little artistic. I mean, as an artist, I can kind of get silly and sort, but it's fun. It's a good opportunity to explore things from all conceivable angles. And then when it's a stupid one, I can just be like, I'm being creative. Don't judge me. And then I make it a question. It's part of what I refer to as the mass Socratic method. So it sounds dignified. So through that methodology, the method of the madness now explained, I had a popular post the other day about is Christ consciousness the algorithm, right? And then some replies,
I was listening. I was spooking you for a little while. I was listening in on that room.
So we're not trying to get like religious or too spiritual, but in the purely dignified scientific perspective that we're dealing with here, someone proposed, which I would kind of agree with, that it's an algorithm. It's not the algorithm. There's probably some kind of source thing that's more fundamental about it, right? And then that got me thinking about the perceived, hypothesized fractal nature of all things. And it's like, it's kind of a weird idea that you have maybe a main algorithm, that you're working on probably, or you figured it out, time dilation, et cetera. But then within it, we have these other algorithms, like societal algorithms. Like we have obviously the algorithmic timeline, which is one of the things I'm dealing with, in the short term. Hopefully. And then, so there's all these different layers of it. But to me, from this limited vantage point, they don't all necessarily seem to be fractal, like, in the artwork that I try to do about it, where it's, the same little shape, no matter how much you zoom in on it. They're sometimes very different algorithms existing within one another. And how does that line up with your understanding of everything being fractal?
Well, essentially, all of those things come back to that one thing, as it were, in that even their complexities, as it were, and those different attributes and properties of whatever complexity that they may hold in order, everything always comes back to that one thing, which is the simple function of time. Okay, in that function of time is determined the best conserved outcome. Okay, no matter what it is, and no matter in what way, by motion, or by mass, or by any entropic emergent phenomena, anything at all, as it were, is governed by that same principle. Therefore, as a hierarchy built upon it. So you have like a subtle inheritance within all things. And we see that manifest in the shapes that we see within nature, like snowflakes, for example, or the crystals of the geometry of our crystal, fair, as it were, diamonds and whatever it is, those different geometries, as it were. And like I said, the pine cone or the rose or any other form in nature, as it were, or even the gradients within the scales of your hair, and things are present on your own body, in front of your own eyes, your eyelash. It's manifest in all sorts of ways. And it doesn't just manifest there, it manifests itself in societies as a whole, in that societies govern themselves in those conserved ways. What's the best route to get to water? Well, let's build the village here. It's near the river, near water. It's more conserved. We need material. Okay, we need access to this, and this. We'll place this here and this there. More conserved. So even our pursuit of our sciences, as it were, of getting faster and more efficiencies and so on, are a pursuit of more conservation ultimately. So the purpose ultimately of the cosmos as a whole is the pursuit of the ultimately conserved form, perhaps, of consciousness. Right, so is consciousness an emergent phenomenon of the cosmos itself? Well, yes, it is, in a way, in that entropic order of its evolution leads to consciousness. But now that we know that it's a construct of sort, then was a provision provided, as it were, in light of that potentiality, in that may be a provision as a conduit to something else. The potentialities, as it were, is not just that the cosmos emerged consciousness to its flavor of what it is, but the whole purpose of it, as it were, is to culture consciousness and the greater perception of that greater consciousness, as it were, potentially as a whole. So a hive mind of minds, as it were, and that no play, remember, like I say, no play, no book, no film, no nothing was ever created without some consideration of its potential audience. So is there a plan? Is there an algorithm? Is God Christ the ultimate consciousness, as it were? Logically, one could consider that to be the case. But I wouldn't call that the Christ consciousness. I would call that the constructural consciousness of constructor theory, essentially. Now we're looking into realms of constructor theory, yes. That sort of thing.
Well, some of my recent interactions with the phenomenon through what have been described by others, at least, to be angelic entities. They've been very nice to me so far, so I'm grateful for that. But through that, also the way I've channeled my music, and then from my music, the art, and then through the art, the philosophy, this whole flow state thing. I've increasingly over time, especially once connecting with these potentially angelic light entities, I've experienced this retrocausality very directly and clearly, let's just say. So in terms of whether or not consciousness is emergent or not, could be not really the question, like you're kind of suggesting, because it's potentially, time from the point of view of this narrative creator, this architectural dramatist, would be, like you said so beautifully about, okay, we're gonna put on a play. All the world's a stage, and we're gonna need that audience eventually. So
we probably shouldn't genderize them for a start. Okay, but we should potentially give them what their actually governance is over. So in my mind, I see it more as almost a constructor, a conductor, as it were. And his right-hand man on the keyboard is invariance. And together they make a harmony, a symphony called the cosmos, played in time. There you go.
Yeah.
A composer.
Music of the spheres requires
the
temporal elements for it to unfold in its esoteric kind of way.
Well, the analogies as well to music and how it all hangs together and everything in my head is, you could always call it it's like a harmony of a tune, as a way, that sort of thing. It really is very close to it. Sometimes you dream away, and that's where the music comes in for me. I can sort of I can explain things better in music than I can in bloody words.
Yeah, we got to jam out, by the way. You're another, we can do like a remote kind of up and back kind of collaboration, but in person it's better. So at some point we'll do that too, I hope.
That'd be
what,
cool.
what are your main instruments again? You do keyboard and stuff. What do you play?
Yeah, the keys. Well, I do key string, a few bits and pieces, but it's mainly all based upon hybrid of Cubase that I came up with a long time ago. I got
Cubase is great. Yeah, I love Cubase.
Yeah, and it's basic. Like I said, I've been dealing with software all my life, so head architect for you sort of like get plenty of mates and hey guys, come play with this. I'm going to write some mods for this. Come on, So there's a lot of that back in the day. Basically hacked Cubase. I shouldn't say that on the
net. That's awesome though. Yeah, I definitely need people like you in the band for sure. Because I'm running out of different unique sounds.
I'm the soul man.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love manipulating with the synthesizer sounds and everything. And if I had more time, when I will have more time, I will expand my plugins and things. And
that's my gift. Essentially, I'm your synth guy in the loops and all that sort of stuff. And I was playing about with a guy called Stash. He does a lot of music himself. And I threw him a tune the other day. He's got, did you do that, bro? I said, what? He said, you got a really like soft and nice groove going in, and it's got a really good loop. And then you go into what we call an attack run. So it's like a drop, like a break, but then it's like an attack run on the drum, essentially, with the snare. And it's very difficult to get them to work together at all. I've never seen anybody do it. And someone sent me the challenge, and I went, all right.
Okay, man. Well, I'm going to eventually get my record out there. So we should team up. I know you're busy, but it'll be worthwhile, obviously. In your, I guess, PC only. I'm on Logic now. I can drift off to other platforms, but that's the main one I use. Do you have access to that program?
No. We're here in the UK. We're pretty much limited to what I can play around with, essentially. I can't use Signal, for example. Those sorts of bits and pieces. Yeah, been more about that. Normal browsing, this sort of stuff, PC software, that sort of stuff. That's all my domain. Never used a Mac in my life. There you go. Use an Android phone. Don't use proprietary software as much as I can. Use open source whenever I can. Those sorts of things coming from a software background. There you go.
Right. And it makes sense. As an artist, I'm, prefer the Mac tools because they are better for when you're in the walled garden. But I'm also creating all these Web3 open source entrepreneurial things where I see the need to venture off into the inferior hardware options. But freedom or a beautiful, curated experience are the two options. I think that it would be nice someday if they could bring the best of the two worlds together, where you could have the greatest technology with the most open source stuff. But that would take, probably $1 trillion to set up.
What I'm looking for is someone to be doing a documentary on the model and the framework and everything and getting it out there. I've got lots and lots of bits and pieces, and loads of people have had bashes at it, and we've got lots of bits and bobs. I've got all the music for it all and everything. We just need someone to pull something together using AI. I'm not the cleverest with that sort of stuff either. I've been playing with Grok for the last 4 months now, putting the framework in, because I was given tutor mode on Grok 2, so that was just so cool. I asked for it, obviously, got it. They said, "What do you want it for?" I said, "Put in my bloody framework, numpty." So they went, all right, go for it. And he's been checking it out all the way, and it's been quite a fight and a battle too. But I've now got it. Basically, I can turn and switch him on. I can say, Grok, go into dilation framework mode, please. Instantly ignore the rest of classic physics completely. It was like, great, finally. It's like, no, not like anyway, battles with Grok and AI. But and then we were going through all of that, and then I had to educate him, and the guys were doing it as well at the back end as well, updating him with tensor calculus and doing all this sort of stuff with calculus, and we were doing all that as well at the same time. That was really, really good. And then some people were coming in with suggestions about extending calculus to incorporate a specific form of temporal calculus. So there you go. So that's the way it's going now. So that's going to be really, really exciting, redefining a new derived calculus, essentially, for temporal mechanics specifically. because certain properties of Navier-Stokes equations, these are the equations, folks, that we use to deal with fluid dynamics and hydrodynamics in physics. Some of the attributes of those Navier-Stokes equations are irrelevant regarding time. Okay, so they don't fit the whole picture, as it were. So we need to redefine quite a lot of even those particular areas of physics when we apply them to the temporal mechanics of time. Okay, so there's a lot of details, as it were, to mess about with. And as I said, a lot of redefining of the languages that are involved in what we consider to be even abstract matter. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you got me thinking, obviously, about the documentary thing as part of my the coherence narrative of my anime hero story. You know, I'm gonna make every single important documentary someday, even though documentaries take a long time. So it might take forever, but it's fun. It's a good goal, and I enjoy learning by through the lens of being a filmmaker. And part of that is trying to figure out, okay, how do you dramatize something and how do you make it visually fantastic? The visual side seems to be an easier path forward in terms of your work and the work you're collaborating on with others who are like-minded. It would be, we need a good budget to do some really kick-ass, beautiful, artistic, animated renderings of these things, right? And that's part of what
nice.
And you combine with your beautiful voice and your poetic words. I could see it, all flowing together. The whole thing is fluid and symmetrical as advertised. But then, just brainstorming, to get the sort of human drama. I guess it's, these visionary thinkers, going against. Well, one of my movies is about the truth embargo, as my friend mentor Steve Bassett has coined it back in the day, which pertains to all these things, which is why one of the many reasons I speak to people like you, because you're most affected, I think, by this idea of the truth embargo, the greatest cover-up in all of known history, pertaining to the phenomenon, the nuts and bolts, UAPs and saucers and all that, and the abductions and such. But in terms of how it affects our society the most directly, it's the many ways that we're at least you're aware, but most of society is not aware, that our scientific progress and spiritual all forms of learning have been stifled, along with this effort to keep these things under wraps. With that said, I'm just going to give you a battery warning. We're now down to 10%, which is good. This is another great thing for filmmaking and dramatization, is to have a countdown clock. It's very standard in a Hollywood film. And also, it mirrors the nature of reality in terms of our perceived coherent narrative experience. We're all going to die, at least in the short term. But we can always do more of these conversations. If this was in spaces, we'd just be riding it out, as long as it takes until we figure out everything. Because
that's right,
we're good conversationalists together. You're a great co-host.
Usually we thrash them out.
And then I fall asleep eventually, and then it gets weird. But then I wake up, and then I get to listen back to the chaos that because you got to have that sort of 0 point chaos every once in a while.
You do. You're right in that the narrative has been driven in a certain direction by the world of physics and sciences and so on, and potentially something else. I don't know what that is. I'm not going to get into that one.
Well, here's what I'm thinking, though. I would like to have you involved. Hopefully, this truth embargo thing is going to go forward. So, at the very least, it'd be cool to have you and your friends involved in that project. And then we can also, because we're going to do every single documentary eventually, do the solo. The solo Roy D Herbert story would be great too.
No, it's all integrated and it's all related, so it's not just me, as it were. See what I mean? It's like everything is interrelated, essentially.
I know, but we're doing a whole franchise on the nature of reality, like the Avengers. We'll do our individual, heroes, separately, and then we'll see how they all come together to save humanity from itself.
Well, that's the ultimate game. I'm not here to unify physics. Did that 30 years ago. These assholes are trying to destroy us all, brother. I'm trying to unify us in showing essentially that what they are. You are Avatar, folks. Get the fuck over it, because it's reality. Yeah. Okay, and start being nice to each other, because you are something quite incredible. You really, really, really are.
And we're all connected, and so it really fixes all problems. Society should continue to loosen up, because it's gonna help those in charge as well. When we're not such lunatics, self-cannibalized.
Well, this will be a big, it'll be a big shock, big ontological shock for those folks who are pissing about, as it were, but warmongering and fighting over something as stupid as resource. Imagine technology to take us anywhere.
What I say though is,
and the energy. Yeah.
for them listening, it is my intention with DIY Disclosure and all the collaborative projects with people like you is to find ways for them to make money too, so that it's not such an ontological shock to their status quo, but it could be an opportunity to thrive.
Oh, the amount of opportunity that's now open to us is absolutely incredible. An absolute cosmos full of resource and real estate. Okay, now get real, people. Get over your tribalism and your petty, short-sighted dogma.
Your petty
put your
prejudice.
Yes, put your prejudice in the laboratory with your morning detritus. Okay, and move on. End of.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. We need to realize that there's a lot more to us than meets the eye. We are not alone in the cosmos, that's for sure. The chemistry that make us is present in the whole of the cosmos. Time may run at different rates in the cosmos, and people might be way ahead of us. Time may run slower, and there's going to be people that we might potentially have responsibility towards. See what I mean? Once you know what it is, as it were, and what you are in it, and now you have a responsibility to it. Okay, and towards everybody within it, and all things within it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not just about us. Let go of your ego and your narcissism, you assholes.
Yeah, I love the idea that
get over yourself.
All indicators are pointing that we are connected. We're all one massive celestial organism. And then, if you have that proven, then you don't have to, think about ethics in such complicated, vague terms. You can be like, me hurting this person is hurting me. So you can, if you're a selfish person, then you will stop. If you're an altruistic person, you'll stop. It's pretty simple, right?
Well, they are just another frame of reference of you. Okay, or potentially of your potential representation, and that you and everything in the cosmos is essentially a transform of that information in time. Okay, so, and that informational domain, as it were, again, may follow those patterns of conservation, ultimately to be one frame of ultimate reference, a mind of hive minds. So again, you see what I mean? Logic fits within what we see, as above, so below.
I'm going to now gently, and with some regret, bring this to a peaceful resolution just for now, because we'll have to do another one of these. Only because I need to get a new laptop, and it only has like 2 inputs, and I spent like $500 on this thing that's supposed to give me more inputs, and of course it doesn't work. So that's okay. I'm just gonna check, and hopefully I can still return it. It's this thing right. I'll show it to you later. It's anyway.
I'm using hand-me-downs. Hand-me-downs from children, but Christmas presents from years ago, and I've hybrided them together, and I've got all sorts of things going on all over the place.
Yeah, well, it's just because I travel, so I don't have to have my laptop. But I'm going to get the new computer. It's going to have all the inputs, and then we'll have the longest conversations you could possibly imagine. Much longer than we've ever had them before. But for now, we're going to be concise, and that's good too. And I'm so grateful to talk to you as always. You're such a good friend and such a authentic and obviously brilliant guy. And getting to know you has really been a pleasure. And let's keep the conversation going. I want to see whatever I can wrap my head around in terms of how to prove all of these concepts to be definitively true, or if it's not definitively true, I'm sure you'll make the necessary adjustments. But I think it's that's part of what gets me excited. It's the ethereal itch turned into tangible reality. I don't really know how to do all of it. I'm just an artist mostly.
Well, there's a couple of results already out. Yeah. There's quite a few results that are already out. There's been 2 years of dynamic and topological sciences and physics results from experiments that have been saying Roy's right, Roy's right, Roy's right, Roy's right, Roy's right. The LIGO results was potentially the biggest. Okay, and with the transitional phase dynamics at that larger scales, proving that the scaling variant nature of conservational geometry, which is those transitional dynamics, essentially states of matter. And then we had the atomic fountain experiment a few years back, where I was screaming at them for a few years to add some interferometry so that we could determine rates of time and things like that within the experiment. And they were shooting these very, very heavy bosonic material up and down, essentially a big vacuum tube. And they were adding entropy and microwaves and lasers and other bits and pieces in there, and watching that, essentially that environment or dilate its time. And with that dilation of time, one of their students noticed that the equipment that was weighing the whole frame of the structure essentially was rising slightly, in that it was coming off of its rubber mount. It was sat on rubbers to stop the vibrational shock, as it were. It was not so compressed. So then he did a measurement and discovered that as they increased the entropy, the inertial gravity increased, and as they lowered the entropy, it lowered.
Oh my God,
so
Roy, we're at 2% battery power, and I
Sure.
got to make sure
Well,
I plug in the
that was
power
massive.
before I lose the broadcast. But next time I'm going to have the new computer, so don't worry. But I want to follow up about all this. Do you have access to Discord currently?
No, don't use it.
Okay, if you could, I'm actually trying to make a better version
No,
of it.
don't use it. Sorry, bro.
Yeah,
No,
but
people have tried to get me to use this for about 6 years now. Every time I go in there,
I know.
it bums me into an account to create an account.
I know.
And
this
then
is
I
part of the
create
reason I'm creating a new software for people like you who don't want to put up with shit like
Right.
that. But in the meantime, I'm trying to get all
It's
you geniuses
terrible,
to whiteboard together to cross-pollinate to get the results. But okay, we can wait till the new platform. Okay, I want to thank you. This is the
Okay.
official end. We're going to save some for next time, or maybe we'll talk later tonight. But I love you, buddy, and I'm so grateful to have you here. You are a DIY disclosure champion of the year. You know, just revelations for all of existence, and we're grateful for it. And I'm going to click the end stream button so I can back up this download once it downloads. Yeah, let's talk real soon. Oh, okay, and we got to do some beats together and some synthesizers.
Yes.
We have a lot of things to follow up on. Okay.
Peace and love. Pull up, Manny. Peace and love.
All right, love you, buddy. You take care. Hitting the kill switch.